Today we're revisiting episode 14 with Arielle Thibodeaux.
Engine 1 out, World Trade Center, 1060. Send every available ambulance, everything you got to the World Trade Center now.
Welcome to Burnt Out. The Burnt Out podcast shares the stories of firefighters, emergency personnel, and other first responders around the world to create a pathway to save lives. The stories you will hear are real and may be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. And now I'd like to introduce you to your hosts for Burnt Out, Skip O and Jeff the Old Guy.
Thank you, Sean, for that introduction. I'd like to also welcome everybody to Burnout Podcast. We are part of the Worldwide Peer Support, and we got our special guest, Arielle Thibodeaux. Thank you. I know you're a busy person. Thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Good. Could you give us a little background about who you are and just a little bit of history about what got you into counseling and about who you are?
Yeah. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker, which is just fancy for therapist. And I've been in the field for over a decade now. But around 2014 was when I got connected to the military and became a behavioral health officer in the U.S. Army and really started doing clinical work with the military. I deployed in 2018 to Kuwait, Iraq, and Jordan, again, as behavioral health. So really my main job was providing mental health counseling and flying around and making sure that people were okay, essentially, while in theater. I got out in 2020, and I've been doing private practice for the last couple of years with One Step Forward Counseling. That's my practice, and serving the veteran and first responder community in Indianapolis. And I'm also married to a combat veteran. We've been together for 7 years now, and I have a stepdaughter. And that's a little bit about me and my background.
Well, thank you, Arielle. Sounds like an interesting background and what, thank you for your service in the military. Really appreciate that.
Thanks. Mm-hmm.
I tell you one thing, my dad and my brother served in the Army. So, when you said you served in the Army, I said, man, I'm at the right place.
Well, and I think that is why so many first responders are really attracted to working with me because of the military background. It's not just because I work with first responders. It's because I have the background and I understand how these communities work. And I think oftentimes we want to work with people who get our backgrounds because I'm sure you've had the same experience that I have where you go see a medical provider and they just don't get it. They just don't get it at all. And you feel very misunderstood and don't really want to go back. And that can be mental health or physical health. It doesn't really matter. I've certainly had that experience and left mad, quite honestly, before.
Well, I know our connection together, Brandon Dryman, he's the captain, I believe, of the Indianapolis, his captain of the peer support for Indianapolis Fire Department. I had, a lot of people know I've been at the Center of Excellence a few years ago. I've been sober for 22 years now. But I had a reoccurrence come up, and then that's how I got introduced to you from Brandon Dryman. And he was telling me something about brain spotting. Of course, me, Mr. Negative, I did EMDR. I get fixed on one thing, and I forget there's other avenues to get some help. But could you tell the listeners out there a little bit about brain spotting, about what do you do when a first responder first comes to you?
Sure. So brain spotting is the trauma therapy that I do. I have been doing brain spotting. I think I did my first training it had to have been 2019. I think that's when I really got very introduced to brain spotting and did my first training. EMDR had become a thing when I first entered the field, like I said, a decade ago. But even then, people were really skeptical about it. People were not open to EMDR until, I would even say like in the last 5 years that I really saw it explode. And a lot of providers are doing it now for trauma. So a lot of people are way more familiar with EMDR than brain spotting these days, but brain spotting actually developed from EMDR. So the creator of brain spotting is Dr. David Grand. And he was an EMDR trainer. And he mostly worked with athletes and like people who were in the performing arts. And the story that he tells of how he started brain spotting is he was doing EMDR with an ice skater. And as he was going across the visual field, he noticed that she had an eye wobble. And he decided, I'm going to stop here and just process from this one spot and see what happens. He was just curious about what would happen instead of doing the rapid eye movement. And so he did that. She came back and basically reported that was the best processing she had ever done out of any of her EMDR sessions. And she was able, I think, to hit her triple axel or something. Like she had the yips, essentially, and couldn't hit her triple axels. And after that was able to. So then he started testing this over and over with people, is if I stop at a certain eye position, what happens with processing? And what he found was that people were having a lot of processing doing just a fixed eye position instead of the rapid eye movement. And that's really how brain spotting was formed. And I think it's been around at least 20 years now. But again, it takes a while for these things to catch up within the mental health field. So that's why there's not as many of us trained in it, but it's definitely exploding because it's an easier version of EMDR. I find that like my veterans and first responders really like it because they don't have to give me their whole trauma narrative in order for it to be helpful. Whereas with EMDR, usually you do have to get into a lot of the narrative piece of things. So the story, what happened, what your beliefs are around it. And so with brain spotting and why I was really attracted to it was because I don't have to have a lot of information about what the trauma actually is for it to be effective, because we're really focusing on the mind-body connection of the trauma. So thinking about the trauma, where you feel it in your body, and then we find the brain spot, that fixed eye position. And again, I don't have to have any content. I just need to know where you feel it in your body and how bothersome it is for you. And then we can go from there. And that's why I think a lot of veterans and first responders like it, because most of us do not want to get into the content of what happened. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want people to know what happened. We just want to feel better. And so that's why I really like brain spotting. But really, the root of it is it's a brain-based trauma therapy that is helping us reprocess old stuff that no longer serves us so that these traumas are not so bothersome for us anymore. So it's not going to make the traumas go away and disappear from memory, but we're hoping that all of the feelings and gunk that comes up with it is less bothersome so that when we are triggered by it or have a triggering event, we can deal with it more effectively and it not be so bothersome to us.
Sure. I know for me, when I came in and we worked on multiple runs or things I had, for me, it was 100% effective. Or close to 100%, whatever, there's close to 100%. I say 100% because I don't think about it now. It's not bothersome to me. I'm not so sensitive to it. I don't give no power to it because of that. And I just, exactly, I didn't know what to expect when Brandon told me you did that. And I looked on Arielle's bio and it says, if you don't like a person that's straightforward, I'm probably not the person for you. I said, well, she's the person for me. And when I read that caught me. I said, that's who I need. We need, and that's what first responders or anybody really, but really first responders, we need somebody who's going to be interface, tell us the truth. And you did it in a way, you didn't belittle, you didn't do a power thing. You was just really upfront and told me what I needed to hear. And you're spot on with how it works. I didn't have to go into detail about the traumas that we worked on. I just went in what was on my mind. You was telling me how I feel. And it was, I went in there thinking that, I don't really have anything to share, I don't think. And then after a while, I'm crying like a little baby, which is good. I let it go because I made up my mind walking through that door. I was going to be as honest as I can with you. And I was going to let everything flow. And you made it comfortable for me, doing what I needed to do.
Yeah. Well, and the big thing with brain spotting is the relationship between therapist and client. And really, studies support that it doesn't really actually matter what intervention we're using with clients. The relationship is what is most important. And so, if you have a good rapport with your provider and then they're using a therapy that works well for you, then really good things can happen. And part of what happens with brain spotting that, like, we don't really talk about with folks in session is this is kind of the woo woo side of it and whatnot. But that relationship and someone being there with you and witnessing this experience of the trauma and holding space for you and carrying it with you. And part of what we're taught in the brain spotting training is that we need to be very energetically attuned to you as the client so that you can borrow from our neurobiology, our calm, our strength, whatever it is that you need from us as the clinician, that we're very attuned to that experience so that you can regulate. Our regulation helps you regulate. Kind of like with kids, you cannot regulate a dysregulated child if you're dysregulated. So we as the provider need to be very regulated so that you can become more regulated. So while it can seem like on the provider side that we're not really doing anything, we really are doing a lot. And oftentimes I can actually really feel what people are experiencing energetically. And I've absolutely had that experience before where I didn't really know any of the content or didn't know what the person was about to tell me, but then I felt that sense and I knew exactly what they were about to tell me as part of the trauma because of that attunement. And so really the relationship is probably the most important part of any therapy, but especially brain spotting. And I've noticed when people do not have a great experience with brain spotting or EMDR, it's because that rapport in the relationship wasn't there. So I think for me, the reason that I do have success with most clients is because of that relationship and that rapport that I have by being part of this community. And people are more willing to come in and be more honest about what they've experienced. Like you said, I decided I was going to walk in the door and, work on this stuff and let my guard down. And when we don't let our guard down, it's really hard for healing to take place. And with these communities, we tend to really have our guard up.
Yeah, I tell you, I used to, and a lot of people, guys that I worked with and ladies, they got that wall up. They're afraid. A fear, we put that tough exterior on, but underneath you got that fear that keeps me. I'm afraid what somebody's going to think about me, or I'm afraid to cry.
Totally.
And then coming into your office, you got the office set up where it felt real comfortable and cozy. You had some smells or some stuff going on there at the same time. And I felt more comfortable. With the music, and you had the headsets I got to wear when I was going through the brain spotting. And for, like you said, you had a calm demeanor about you. So that it calmed me down. Just you having that calm, even when I got in those sensitive things, you kept the tone calm,
right,
safe. And that helped me to walk a little bit further to do some other things that I didn't expect that I was going to work on that came out.
Right. Well, and with veterans and first responders, everyone is so afraid of traumatizing others with their stuff that people have to be comfortable enough to share, because if you guys are afraid that I'm going to be traumatized by whatever you share, you're not going to open up. And I fully recognize that. And oftentimes I do have to tell people, like, whatever you tell me is not going to traumatize me. And if I am bothered by it, I have my own therapy that I do. And so that's why that relationship piece is so important in therapy, because if y'all are afraid to traumatize us, you're not going to tell anybody anything. You're not going to let that guard down. You're not going to be completely transparent about what's going on. And I'm not going to say that that happens with every single client I see. I'm not a fit for everybody. But my point is, with therapy, it's really important to find somebody that you do have that relationship with and that you do feel like you can let your guard down. Because if you don't, you're probably not going to get as much healing out of it. And so it's okay to switch to somebody else or even a different modality, because I don't think brain spotting is the end all be all. I have a lot of success with it. And when it is helpful to people, it can be really miraculous for people. But I've had times where it wasn't super helpful and maybe EMDR was the thing that they needed. And that's totally fine. I just want whatever's in it be healing for somebody. But on the client side of things, you just got to make sure that you have a good relationship with your therapist so that you can get what you need from it.
Sure. And, one thing we talked about before, how, the similarities between first responders, like everybody thought law enforcement, military, more connected than the fire department. And you educated me. In your experience, what did you see in that?
Yeah. So yes, I absolutely think that military and fire service are very, very similar. The way in which we structure the chain of command, the way that we have teams, the way that we eat together, sleep together, work out together, do missions together, like everything is a sense of togetherness, and it creates this like family, so to speak. I mean, within the military, we always talk about that I am my brother's keeper, watch your six, that we look out for each other. And it's the same in fire service. And whatever shift you're on is very similar to how within the military we have a squad or our team. And those are the people that you get to know extremely well and do everything with. And even though they may irritate the crap out of you, you're still going to like watch out for them. Because of that family. And there's totally just a family aspect to it that's very different than civilian careers, and also a little bit different from law enforcement, because law enforcement does tend to be a lot more individual, and they do things a lot more alone, unfortunately, which is a whole different issue. But military and fire service, very, very similar in structure and just the way that we go about our jobs in life together.
I have two brothers that are retired police officers, and me and you talked about it. I talked to a lot of police officers. A lot of them, they're afraid to reach out for help because they don't want their gun taken away. They don't want their shield taken away. When they're saying, I'm thinking about killing myself, or I got a drinking problem, some of them told me that's the first thing they'll do is take your gun and put you on a desk job or something. And that's a fear. How do you think what do we need as a community or an individual to help our law enforcement brothers and sisters? How can we make changes in that?
Man, that's like the $1 million question. Because really for any of our communities, veterans, first responders, whatever, like we are behind in getting help and people feeling like that they can access mental health treatment. But I definitely think the law enforcement community is behind fire service and military for sure because of what you just said. But that also happened in the military too, is people were so convinced, like, I'm going to be medically retired immediately if I disclose this. I'm going to lose my ability to carry my weapon. I'm going to be taken out of my unit. And that stuff did happen at first. It did. And it took them actually standing up, behavioral health officers like I was, and us coming in and then like doing the work to educate the military of like, hey, this is not how you're going to solve your suicide problem, that things started to shift and us being integrated into units. That's what it really took. And over the years that I served, I did see that shift start to happen. And I think that's why like many fire departments, bigger fire departments that have like an integrated peer support, integrated mental health person, that they are also seeing stuff change, is because they have someone there to educate and show like, it's not so scary. We're not going to kick everybody out. But if you have the experience where your buddy went and said, hey, I'm suicidal, and then they immediately got put on desk work, that tells everyone, oh, no, we do not disclose what's going on with us because look what happened to that dude. And as long as they keep doing that, people will keep hiding and there will continue to be suicides. If people think they're going to get in trouble for disclosing a mental health issue, they're not going to disclose it. there's already a lot of shame in it anyway. Especially within these communities, because we're supposed to be tough. We're supposed to be able to deal with it. We're supposed to be able to pick up and drive on. And when we can't, and then you punish me for it too, people are not going to be honest.
Yeah. And that's, I think too, the fire, it's changed our ship's turning around with the fire department quite a bit, and the military. I think the same thing with the police department. When you get somebody that struggled and they can tell their story, I think that opens the door, not just to the administration. Hey, this is working. Let's follow the lead of this city or whatever, or this guy. And I think that's what we need, that courageous person that's a law enforcement that can tell their story in a safe way. And that might be one of the things that helps, which I know there's some out there, and hopefully they're telling their story and helping change things in their community too.
And that's what I tell clients too, is that your story is important and it matters, and it really can be helpful to other people. Because when that guy comes to you and is like, I'm really struggling, and then you say, I've struggled too, and this is what I did. I went to therapy, I went to rehab, whatever it is. And especially when that person really respects you, they're like, oh, that means it's okay. Like, it's okay that I've been struggling. It's okay that I feel like I'm a mess, because you were too, and you got help. And when people do disclose that, I really think that is also one of the biggest things that can change our communities, is people just being honest about, I'm struggling and I did get help and now I'm doing a lot better.
Well, I know for me, when I was in there and I was afraid to tell you, I was thinking about killing myself, but it was crossing my mind. You go, Skip, just be honest. I'm not going to put you in a straitjacket. So I think that helped me, because you got my trust, and I was trying to hold some things back simply because I didn't want you to go on red alert and say, like happened in the past for me before everybody gets concerned. Yep. I get it. Yeah. I understand why they do, because
I do too.
I understand, but you made me feel comfortable too. And another thing, and I won't go into detail, you shared some personal things with me, and I thought, man, she trusts, she's a human being. And that's usually clinicians don't do that. But when you did that personally with me, and you became a human being that has his own struggles, and I didn't think of you up there. So that helped me immensely when you did that. And I'm really grateful for that. What do you think about other clinicians doing that?
Yeah. So within the therapy community right now, there's kind of two schools of thought. There's the absolutely no self-disclosure is bad camp. And then there's the self-disclosure is not a big deal if used well. And I definitely was in that rigid place when I started in the field, because that's what I was taught in school. I was taught it's all bad. You can only do harm. And over time I saw that's not really true. And for me, just for my own values, I don't like the power dynamic that happens in therapy of, I'm the clinician, I know everything, and I'm above you. I don't like that. I never liked it. It didn't feel good. It did not feel in alignment with my value system. And so I didn't want to operate that way. And so I operate from a self-disclosure can be a good thing if used well and appropriately. And you have to have done a lot of your own work to be able to do that well and appropriately. And self-disclosure isn't about putting all your crap onto a client. It's about if they have a situation that you really do know how this feels, to say no, I really do get that one. Or even just saying I use these skills too, or I've done the same type of therapies. And so I totally get what it's like being on the other side of this and experiencing this brain spotting thing. So I'm more of a fan of it. I understand why other clinicians are not. So yeah, like I said, there's really two camps here with this at this point. There's not a lot of in between. I think we're going to see over the years that there's going to be more of this self-disclosure is fine. There's now therapies emerging where it's totally based on shared experience. And I mean, that's why peer support has been really helpful to folks, is because of that shared experience, and a peer helping a peer. And most people who are attracted to becoming therapists, we usually do have our own stuff. We were attracted to these fields for a reason. And we oftentimes do have a lot of very similar experiences as our clients, and that's okay. And we're human. And sometimes we also screw up too and have really bad things going on too.
Well, I tell you, the way you're doing things for me personally. And I, I'm sitting in the chair and I don't know these other people are walking out. I don't know who they are and stuff, but it looks like they keep coming back. And so you're doing something right.
Apparently, because some people just won't go away, which is funny. But I get it. I mean, with the other part of working with these communities is we usually do have a lot of trauma to unpack. And it's not just trauma from the work we do. A lot of people also have childhood trauma, adulthood trauma, trauma within their relationships, and then also the stuff that happened at work. And so I usually do see people for quite a while because we're unpacking a lot, and a lot of people haven't ever done therapy or they did really limited therapy. So sometimes it does take a while, and that's okay. That's really not a big deal at all.
So with a lot of these first responders, do you see, is the divorce rate higher than the normal person?
I mean, there are some studies that suggest that, yes, that is true. And statistically, especially in the military, I think, amongst military officers, most have been married at least twice. But yes, I do see that quite a bit. A lot of people are in blended family situations, second, third marriages. And when I do trainings with other clinicians about working with our communities, is I tell them, for some reason, you guys are really attracted to some crazy situations. And so sometimes these relationships can be complete dumpster fires. So people are also coming in with that on top of the trauma, is that the relationship is just a complete disaster. And that can really complicate things too, because if your home life is not in order, it definitely makes being at work, being on a 24-hour shift, that much harder. Or being away on a deployment. Whenever people's home life is messy, it just makes the work we do so much harder. And I think sometimes because of the personalities of folks who are attracted to these fields, we're attracted to that adrenaline rush. We tend to pick partners who also give us that adrenaline rush, but not always in a good way.
Sure. And so it's real, when reason I ask that, not only you counsel the first responders, do you suggest the families get help themselves, like family counseling and their own counseling and counseling together?
Yeah, typically, yes. Yeah. And a lot of times when I see somebody, they have come in at the ultimatum of the spouse, and the spouse has told them, if you don't get help, this relationship is done. And when it's at that place, I usually tell people yeah, you need to do individual work, but you guys need to do some work together, and your spouse probably needs to do some individual work as well. Because right now things are dysfunctional, and if there's any hope, we got to move you to functional. Sure.
That's what is fortunate with me and my wife. She got some help and talked, and we got counseling together, and it's worked itself out. And
yeah,
being honest, with our spouses, it's hard to do sometimes. I think I had a situation where I told Arielle, my wife was more worried about something else than me killing myself. And there, you could say, well, being a wife, I can relate. I understand. And you help educate me on, I don't know what a woman thinks, or I don't, because I'm, but it helped me educate me where I could understand how to better talk with my wife and be more understanding. So I think getting all that stuff out for, not just me, other first responders, when we get the crap out of our heads, you should say, we can be a better person and better communicators with our spouse, family members, and be a better worker at our job. Arielle, there is somebody sitting at home. They're by themselves, and they don't know which direction to go. They got a lot of trauma from whether the job or childhood, and they're just, don't know whether they want to stay in this world. They don't know if they want to go to work. They're just kind of lost. What would you tell them if you had a 2-minute conversation with them?
Well, I would probably tell them that it's understandable, because when we've had trauma, life does feel way harder. And it does make us question everything. And so it's really understandable to be sitting in that pain and not knowing what to do. When I recently have went through just some family stuff and my partner really needed help, like I knew what to do because I'm a clinician. I knew how to get him help immediately, but most people don't. And so not knowing where to start, what to do is really understandable. People don't know how to do that. And then, when I was trying to find some of that help, I wouldn't get responses, or people were really booked out, or, oh, we can't help with this because I'm not trained in this. And so I really got to experience what that's like of being a person and reaching out for help and being met with resistance. And so it can be really hard. Just knowing that you are suffering profoundly and you cannot find help. And that can be really tough. And so it's really important to connect to other people, though, because the more that we're alone, the more that we are isolated, the more we will convince ourselves that our life is not worth living and no one cares. And it's not true, because I've experienced suicides just working in this field, and with who I do. Suicide is just a reality, unfortunately, and we have a very high suicide rate. And I know that I have been affected profoundly by people I know who completed suicide, but their family members are always distraught and broken, and all they wanted was their person to be around and to not feel like they were a burden or think that they are a burden. But when we're in the deep, dark despair, we're very convinced, people would be better off without me. I am a burden. But it's just simply not true. It's the depression talking. It's the trauma talking. It's the pain trying to convince us of something that's other than reality. And when we reach out and connect to somebody, usually somebody's going to say, no, I want you around and I want to help you. And even like reaching out to another person that you served with or worked with, like oftentimes they're probably going to help you and want to be there with you. And like I said, like with brain spotting, like someone there witnessing with you and carrying this with you. Trauma is trauma because we went at it alone, and you don't have to go at it alone forever. There can be healing in allowing people in.
I kind of look at you as a guide, when you're weathering through a lot, when you're lost in the woods or you're can't find your way, you can guide us through that tough part, and we can see more of the light at the end of the tunnel. But there's one thing I also ask all the guests: is there a quote or a statement through your life when you're going through something that always resonates in your mind that you repeat that helps you out?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So one of the tattoos I have is an Eleanor Roosevelt quote that you must do the thing you think you cannot do. And so I do remind myself of that there's been so many times in life I was like, I cannot do this. But I always have been able to. It may not have been done well, and it may have been hard. It may have come with pain, but I did it. And sometimes I have to remind myself that you must do the thing you think you cannot do. And I can. And we all can. But like I said, it doesn't always mean that it was done well. That's okay too.
That's good stuff. If somebody here in Indiana wants to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
Yeah, so my website is onestepforwardcounseling.com, and my social media handles are the same. And my email is just Arielle at onestepforwardcounseling.com. But it's best to email me or visit my website to get more contact information. And I also have resources on my website for finding other therapists and books that I recommend to folks or podcast episodes and such. I have a whole resources section on my website.
Well, Arielle, thank you very much for being on here with us. And I'd like to thank the listeners. If you need Arielle, just get a hold of her. If you want to get a hold of us at burnoutpodcast.org, we can connect you with Arielle too. Also, the Worldwide Peer Support has support Zoom meetings on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 8 p.m. And then Thursdays at 8 p.m. the same time is for families for first responders. They can jump on there too themselves. So, Arielle, again, thank you for being on here. And I'd like to thank everybody for listening. And everybody remember, go home tonight, shut your radio off, and get some sleep. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Burnout. Burnout is brought to you by the Worldwide Peer Support. You can visit Burnout Podcast at burntoutpodcast.org or visit Worldwide Peer Support at worldwidepeersupport.org. Your host for Burnt Out is Skip O. Executive producer Sean P. Neal. And produced by mypodcast.media.